You won't believe what happened to me at 16. I was kicked out of my home with only $15 and a trash bag, no warning, no second chance. I had nothing, not even hope. But years later, the same family that abandoned me showed up at my $1 billion house, asking to move in. They thought they could just walk back into my life. They were dead wrong. I still remember the day as if it were carved into my memory with fire. 16 years old, standing at the threshold of a home that had once been familiar, now turned cold and unwelcome. In my hand, I clutched $15, the only money I had in the world, and a trash bag filled with the few belongings I could salvage. My parents had made their decision. Their words were blunt, uncompromising. You're on your own. Pack up and leave. The shock of being expelled from the only home I had known hit me like a physical blow. I staggered down the street, the weight of my trash bag digging into my shoulder, each step echoing the reality I could not escape. 16, barely 16. With nothing but the thin fabric of my will and a fragment of hope, I had to face the world. The city stretched out before me, indifferent, sprawling, full of shadows and possibilities alike. At first, survival was all I could think about. I slept wherever I could find shelter park benches, abandoned buildings, even beneath the awning of a 24-hour diner. Hunger gnawed at me relentlessly. I scavenged whatever I could, leftover food, discarded bottles, coins forgotten in the gutter. Each day was a battle, a test of endurance I had never imagined I would face at such a young age. The first winter was brutal. Cold seeped through my thin clothes, and I learned quickly the sting of frostbite and the ache of bone-chilling wind. I remember curling inside my trash bag for warmth, pretending it was a blanket, a shield, anything to hold on to the illusion of safety. It was during those nights that I discovered a part of myself I had never known, the quiet, stubborn spark of resilience that refused to let me break. Even when the world seemed intent on doing just that, food was scarce, and so were friendly faces. Strangers often avoided me, casting wary glances at the teenage boy with dirty clothes and hollow eyes. But not everyone was unkind. I met people along the way, other lost souls, drifters, and a few surprisingly generous strangers who taught me lessons about humanity, about kindness and survival. Every handshake, every shared meal, became a small victory, a reminder that the world was not entirely devoid of compassion. School was a distant memory. I had been forced to drop out months before, my focus shifting entirely to survival. I learned things no curriculum could ever teach: how to navigate streets without drawing attention, how to beg without humiliation, how to sleep in the shadows without fear. Each day sharpened me, molded me into someone capable of enduring what no 16-year-old should have to endure. And yet, despite the hardship, there was a fire inside me that refused to die. I began to imagine a future, even when it seemed impossible. I imagined a life where I would never again be powerless, where I could command the world around me instead of being crushed by it. I imagined a life of wealth, security, and respect not for vanity, but as a shield against ever feeling that helplessness again. The streets became both my classroom and my battlefield. I learned to hustle in ways most would find unthinkable. Odd jobs, small trades, anything that could earn me a few dollars. I became adept at spotting opportunities, exploiting gaps in the market of the underworld and the overlooked. Even then, I carried a moral compass, careful not to let desperation erode my ethics entirely. But each dollar earned, each small triumph, was a step toward something larger, a future that only I could define. Months turned into years. I grew stronger, smarter, more resourceful. Every setback became a lesson, every humiliation a building block. I learned to read people, to anticipate their moves, to negotiate and persuade. By the time I was 18, the teenage boy who had wandered the streets with $15 in a trash bag had become a young man with skills, knowledge, and ambition sharp enough to cut through the uncertainty of the world. It wasn't an easy journey, nor was it straightforward. There were nights filled with fear, days burdened with exhaustion, moments when giving up seemed like the only option. But surrender was not in my nature. I refused to allow the circumstances of my youth to dictate the rest of my life. I had tasted adversity, and I had survived. That knowledge became my most potent weapon, a constant reminder that if I could survive 16 with nothing, I could survive anything. And so, the foundation of my life was laid not in classrooms or with the support of family, but in the harsh crucible of survival, forged by necessity and honed by determination. That experience, painful as it was, became my secret advantage. It taught me to see opportunities where others saw obstacles, to turn weakness into strength, and to build something extraordinary from almost nothing. After surviving those brutal teenage years, I realized that endurance alone wasn't enough. Surviving with $15 in a trash bag had honed my instincts, but it didn't teach me how to thrive. I knew I needed knowledge, connections, and a plan, something beyond mere survival. Every day I observed the world around me, the people with wealth, influence, and power, and I wondered what they did differently. That curiosity became my driving force. I started small. Odd jobs turned into part-time work into small ventures, and each success, no matter how tiny, added fuel to the fire within me. I learned how to manage money, stretch it, and invest even the smallest amounts wisely. I read constantly, absorbing lessons from biographies, business books, and stories of people who had transformed their lives from nothing. Every hour was an investment in the version of myself I was determined to become. Networking was another lesson. I had to learn quickly. At first, it was clumsy. Teenagers don't always get taken seriously, but necessity forced me to adapt. I observed, I listened, and I asked questions. I watched the way successful people carried themselves, the language they used, and the decisions they made. Slowly, I built relationships, sometimes transactional at first, but gradually ones that carried trust and influence. These connections would later become crucial stepping stones in my climb out of poverty. Opportunities began to present themselves in unexpected ways. A mentor I met at a local workshop introduced me to small investment opportunities. Another acquaintance offered me a stake in a business venture I barely understood at the time. I took calculated risks, learning to balance intuition with research, and each risk paid off incrementally. The accumulation of small successes began to snowball, slowly transforming my life from chaos to stability. But wealth wasn't my only goal. I wanted independence, the power to decide my own fate without relying on anyone who might betray or abandon me. I remembered too clearly the sting of being cast aside at 16, and that memory shaped my ambitions. I didn't just want to be rich. I wanted to be untouchable, self-sufficient, and in command of my destiny. There were setbacks, of course. Some ventures failed, some relationships soured, and some risks didn't yield returns. Each failure, however, became a lesson rather than a defeat. I learned to analyze mistakes ruthlessly, extract insights, and apply them immediately. Over time, this iterative process sharpened my judgment, intuition, and business acumen. By my mid, I had transformed from a street-hardened teen into a formidable young entrepreneur with multiple streams of income and growing influence. My approach to money and opportunity became almost surgical. I diversified investments, explored tech startups, real estate, and international markets. Each decision was informed by years of observation, study, and trial and error. I developed an uncanny ability to predict trends, anticipate market shifts, and act decisively when others hesitated. My instincts, honed by survival on the streets, gave me an edge that no classroom or textbook could provide. By the time I turned 30, I had built a portfolio of assets that crossed 7 figures, approaching 8, and eventually 9. My life had transformed beyond recognition. From a boy who had wandered the streets with nothing, I now commanded a level of wealth that allowed me not only comfort and security, but also influence and power. The man who had been powerless at 16 now wielded autonomy and control over his destiny. Yet, wealth came with new challenges. With success, I had to navigate envy, opportunism, and the sudden attention of people who had ignored me when I had nothing. Family, too, became a delicate matter. Those who had once abandoned me sometimes resurfaced, seeking a place within the life I had built. I approached these situations cautiously, aware that my past vulnerability could easily be exploited if I wasn't vigilant through it all. I never forgot where I came from. The lessons of the streets, the importance of resilience, vigilance, and self-reliance remained ingrained in me. They guided my decisions, protected me from being naive, and reminded me that every opportunity, no matter how promising, must be evaluated with care. I had learned that trust was earned, not given, and that success often attracts both genuine allies and opportunists in equal measure. By my late 30s, my wealth had grown into the billions. I owned properties around the world, investments in major companies, and a lifestyle that reflected the extraordinary journey I had undertaken. But the memory of that 16-year-old boy clutching $15 in a trash bag remained a constant anchor. It reminded me that no matter how high I climbed, the foundation of my life was built on grit, resourcefulness, and an unyielding refusal to be defeated. It was a quiet afternoon when they showed up. I was in my office, overlooking the skyline from one of my penthouses, reviewing investment reports, when the intercom buzzed. My heart skipped a beat, a strange mixture of curiosity and apprehension washing over me. When I opened the door, I saw them, my family. The people who had cast me out at 16, the ones who had doubted my ability to survive, now standing on my doorstep, smiling nervously. "Can we come in?" my mother asked, her tone careful, almost rehearsed. My father remained silent, his hands shoved into his pockets, eyes darting around as though absorbing the magnitude of what had been built without them. I studied them, noting the subtle signs of hesitation, pride, and an almost imperceptible guilt. They had seen my success from a distance, perhaps even envied it, but now they wanted to be a part of it. Years of hardship, struggle, and relentless pursuit of my dreams flashed through my mind. I remembered the nights curled in a trash bag, the hunger, the humiliation, and the relentless determination that had brought me here. Every ounce of my life had been earned, every success a testament to my resilience. And now they stood before me, asking to share in a life they had once abandoned me to survive without. We were thinking, my mother began, hesitating, maybe we could move in, just for a while, until things settled down. Her voice trembled slightly, a mixture of hope and fear. I could see the calculation behind her words, the unspoken expectation that wealth could solve everything, that it could erase the past. But wealth had not erased the lessons I had learned. It had reinforced them. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let silence fill the room, letting them sit with their anticipation, with their hope that I would welcome them. I observed every micro-expression, the subtle tension, the flicker of anxiety, the fleeting glance exchanged between them. I realized then that the power dynamics had shifted completely. They were no longer the authority figures. I was. The boy they had doubted had become the man they now sought approval from. "You know," I finally said, my voice calm but firm, "you left me with $15 and a trash bag when I was 16. I survived. I built a life from nothing. And now you want to move into a $1 billion house that I earned myself." I let the words hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. Their eyes widened, a mixture of shock, guilt, and disbelief crossing their faces. They stammered, tried to justify themselves, citing hardship, misunderstandings, the passage of time. But nothing could erase the reality that their absence, their lack of support, had shaped the very person I had become. I had learned that trust must be earned, loyalty must be demonstrated, and respect cannot be demanded. Their return was not a guarantee of anything, least of all a place in the life I had fought to build. I watched them process this truth, their expressions a mosaic of regret and astonishment. They had underestimated the boy they abandoned, never imagining that he would not only survive but thrive beyond their expectations. Now, confronted with the magnitude of my success, they faced the consequences of their past decisions. I held the power, and I understood its weight. "Moving in isn't just about living here," I continued. Pacing slowly, "it's about trust, commitment, and respect. You abandoned me once. Why should this be any different?" My words struck like a hammer, shaping the narrative firmly in my control. I could see the realization dawning, the understanding that wealth alone does not rewrite history. The consequences cannot be escaped by simply asking. Hours passed in tense discussion. They attempted to appeal to nostalgia, shared memories, and fleeting moments of family connection. I listened, weighed, and reflected. This was more than a test of generosity. It was a measure of character, of integrity, and of whether those who had once caused pain were capable of acknowledging it and proving they had changed. In the end, I made my decision, not out of spite, but from principle. I had fought tooth and nail to build a life, a sanctuary of security and achievement. That life was not a reward for those who had failed me in the past. It was a testament to perseverance, vision, and self-reliance. I offered them a chance, but it would come with boundaries, expectations, and accountability. Anything less would undermine everything I had endured to reach this point. Their reactions were a mix of relief and humility, tempered by the stark reality that they could no longer rely solely on my wealth to erase past wrongs. They had to demonstrate commitment, trust, and genuine respect to earn their place. It was a powerful reversal of roles, the once dismissed child now setting the terms, the boundaries, and the conditions for inclusion. Sitting back in my office later that evening, I reflected on the journey. From a trash bag and $15 to a $1 billion empire, the path had been anything but linear. It had been forged through adversity, tenacity, and an unwavering belief in my own potential. And while wealth brought comfort and opportunity, it also brought clarity, the understanding that respect, loyalty, and accountability were far more valuable than money alone. The family who had once left me to fend for myself now faced the challenge of proving themselves worthy of the life I had created. I realized that success was not merely about accumulating wealth, but about shaping the world around me, defining relationships on my own terms, and ensuring that past mistakes were neither forgotten nor repeated. In the end, power, resilience, and discernment were the true measures of the life I had built. And the family who returned would have to recognize and respect that.